Hi, Bonita. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Katie. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I heard you on the podcast of a now friend of mine. She was someone I interviewed for my own podcast, and actually we were in a group together. And she posted a little clip of your interview with her or her interview with you. And it was so good that I immediately had to go straight to my phone and find the episode and listen to it. And
Oh, thank you. That's awesome.
it was amazing. And then I said, oh, this would be perfect for my audience as well. And you very graciously accepted and said you would be here. So thank you very much. I just mentioned to you before we hit record, I was going through your website before we got on the phone, and it looks like you have lived many lives in this one lifetime. You have done so many things. Can you give our audience a little snippet of, all your lives in this life?
Oh my goodness. I'll try and encapsulate it. Um, so I was born into a psychic family. So when I was a little girl, I was clairaudient, clairvoyant. I would hear and see things other people couldn't. And because my mother and her mother were like that, I'd run downstairs and go, Mom, I heard the voices again. And she'd be like, That's nice, dear. It was our norm. I didn't know I was unusual until I went to school and started talking about these things, and people didn't understand. I have been married a few times before marrying the love of my life this past September. So I have 4 children and 5 grandchildren from a previous marriage. And I've traveled a lot. I've been to Tibet and Nepal. I've been to parts of the States. I've picked up a few things over the years, learned to ride a motorcycle in my 50s. I'm 60 now. And just I've had some amazing assistants along the way, a mentor who helped me a great deal to work on my core patterns that came from growing up in a very dysfunctional family. And, just all the stuff that goes with that, all the things we learn and we end up in bad relationships because it's our norm.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and then we have that work to do to move out of that to get to the point where you can be in a really healthy situation. And I've got nothing but admiration and appreciation for my husband, who was introduced to me by mutual friends a year ago.
Oh, wow. You guys got married quick then, right? It was only a year ago, and then you
Well,
got married this past September.
I moved here from Ontario in 2011, and I did some dating. Um, but with Tillman, it was actually quite funny. On our first date, we bonded over having both read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. So there's some really deep and gritty reading about, somebody who lived through the Holocaust and the camps, right?
Mhm.
Friends who brought us together introduced us. We all sat down at lunch. They discreetly left after a few hours. And then we sat and talked till 8:30 that night.
Oh,
And two
wow.
days later, he took me out for dinner. We're kind of sitting across from each other, going, We're it for each other for life, right? Yep, both on the same page, both just knew it. And then a few days later, he took me out to see a theater production and go for dinner. And he lived out closer to Lake Country, like, Sexsmith Road area. And I
Mhm.
still lived in West Kelowna at the time. And that night, a big snowstorm hit. So we're crawling back to his place, realizing it's a fool's errand to try to get me home. So
Mhm.
I stayed. And after 3 days, when the roads were finally passable again, he said, I don't want you to feel pressured to stay. I'll take you home. And I said, Why would I go there? You're not there. So I basically moved in after
Oh
5 days.
gosh, wow. The universe like sent this snowstorm for you guys to spend this
Right?
time together.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And I will just say so I do post these episodes also on YouTube, so anyone who watches it will be able to
Awesome.
see our faces. Anybody who's just listening, you would never know that you are 60 years old and a grandmother. You look so young.
Thank you.
Probably from all your amazing adventures that you've had, learning to ride a motorcycle. That's amazing. All this traveling you've done. It's just so fantastic. But even though you grew up in this psychic family and it was the norm for you, when I read your website, it looks like for many years you did things that were not related to that at all, like
Yes.
journalism and what else was in there? I'm computer programming or something. Like what are all these other things that you did? And was it because you didn't want to fully embrace this gift that you had, or you just weren't sure how to use it as a source of income?
No, it's something I've always done. I actually started doing professional readings at 18.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was getting paid to do readings at that age. I think it was more that I'm a very multifaceted person. I have a very analytical brain, which actually helps me in my psychic work, because when I'm working with cards or I'm tuning in on a person's subconscious or I'm looking at their chakras, all those different elements come together to bring together a really cohesive story for me to present my clients and say, this is what I'm seeing. Here's what's been affecting you since you were a toddler. And here's some steps now to actually address that.
Yeah.
So that part of me that loves analysis ended up working on websites and working with material for a software developer. And I ended up designing my own websites. It's something I actually do for my business clients. I create their
I saw
websites and
that.
teach them how to
Yes.
uniquely market themselves.
Yes.
So the site you looked at, my site is one I put together.
And
Um,
it's beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then things like becoming an administrator at Queen's University, where I was crunching data for 50 different departments. I actually I find working with data weirdly relaxing. So,
You know,
so
it's so
I just got that
interesting
kind of
that you
brain that loves
say
to do
that.
everything, you
Yes,
know?
it's so interesting you say that. So my daughter, she really has psychic abilities that I really want her to develop, and it's just so glaringly obvious that she has them. And she is started taking accounting her freshman year of high school, and she says the same thing. She's taken a
Yeah.
couple of years now. She keeps every year taking the next level, and she's like, I don't know, I just find it really relaxing. Like and I'm like, relaxing? What? That sounds terrible.
You know why it is? Sorry, I didn't mean to
Why?
cut you off. Go ahead.
No, tell me. I want to know.
Because I also took accounting and I used to do all my own books until I moved to the Okanagan and went, yeah, I don't have time for that. I'll let the professionals do it because they'll do it better than me anyway. It's that when you're working with numbers, it's either right or wrong. There's no gray
Okay.
area. So it's
Yeah.
kind of relaxing because your mind doesn't have to, and there is some interpretation. It's like, okay, why didn't I balance here? What's missing? What do I have to go looking for? But it's like once you balance everything, it's just right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of relaxing.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
solving puzzles. I love games that involve puzzles and
Yeah.
logic. So it's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But for me, it wasn't until 2007 that I hit this point where I just went, it's time for me to do this work full time.
Yeah.
So I quit my job at the university and just dove into doing this as full time work. And I said to the universe, allow me to be of service, but support me in that service. And
Right.
it's made it possible. And, my clients, the support I've received from the community has made it possible for me to do this as a full time living.
Yeah. And was there a precipitating event in 2007 that made you finally come to that place, or it was just sort of an inner knowing, like an intuitive?
It, it was basically being dropped down a grade in pay and being given more duties. And I was like, whoa, this does not sit right with me. And
Okay.
I approached my manager and said, okay, how do I get back to where I was? And basically was told I've hit the glass ceiling. So it's like out of there.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what? It's another example of how when things go in a way that maybe we wouldn't prefer in the moment, that something really beautiful comes out of it. So that's
Yeah, because
wonderful.
I loved that job and I loved the
Yeah.
people I worked with, but it was the management was changing and changing how we were allowed to operate. We weren't really I'm one of those people that whatever I do, I want to give it my very, very best. And I
Mhm.
wasn't being allowed to. And
Yeah.
that was upsetting as well. And not only did I go into full-time work at that point in what I do, I took on a sideline job as editor of a national business magazine. So, because I always like to be doing something.
Yeah.
So all of that though has really helped inform when I'm offering my clients strategies, whether they're running their own business or they're dealing with a difficult boss or coworkers. I didn't just leave. I created strategies for myself to cope with those situations before I left. So when I left, I was moving towards something, not away
Mhm.
from something. And I
Yeah.
always emphasize that with my clients. Don't be moving away from something because you're just going to create a similar scenario the next place you go if you don't do the internal shift.
Yes.
right? You
Yes.
shift
Yes.
internally, you're creating a different reality you're moving into.
Yes, I love that. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And we're all about the internal work on this show. So so then how do you do what you do? So you work with individuals, right? Just on an individual basis, or also
Um,
in specific regards to business coaching?
and I work with couples and I've worked with children.
Okay.
There are times people have brought their children or their teenagers to me and said, they've been to all the psychologists, they're still having anxiety issues. And I don't know why it seems like the techniques that I offer are ones they haven't heard of before and they seem to find them effective. So I'm just happy to help whoever shows up at my doorstep. And, this community is the most entrepreneurial community in Canada. So I do work with a lot of entrepreneurs. And what I find about the kind of coaching I do is it's a shortcut because people, if they go to a regular coach, they may spend months or years talking about something until they get to the
Mhm.
core of the matter. Whereas I can just tune in and say, here are your patterns. Here's how they're affecting you. Now let's give you some strategies to work with.
Okay.
And I've
And
I've been involved in hiring decisions, merger decisions, because I just need first names and I can describe that person's work style and personality and whether they're a good fit.
oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's amazing. That is so cool. Well, do you believe that everyone has these abilities? We just
Yes,
maybe are not
absolutely.
always okay. Okay. So
It's like
how
it's like a muscle we haven't learned to exercise. When you grow up in a psychic family and you have abilities, it's kind of taken for granted. My mother's reaction was, it's no big deal, which was actually good because some people, when their children show psychic abilities, go, oh my God, you're so special. That kid does not need that. They need to be a kid. So you want to be very relaxed. When my children started to show abilities, I was very low key in my response to them so that they wouldn't attach too much to what was going on. Um, I know I'm digressing here. Sorry. Uh, sorry, can you repeat the question so I
I
make
was
sure I'm on target?
asking if everyone has these abilities, which you
Yes,
said yes, but I guess my follow-up question would be are some people like you from a young age able to access
right.
them, and other people would say, I don't have any psychic ability at all. I don't know what you're talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
Well, when a little kid says, why does Uncle George have a red cloud around him? And his parents go, oh, don't be so silly, or oh, you're such a storyteller. They're looking to their parents to tell them what reality is. So if the parent mirrors something back that isn't a reflection of what the child is experiencing, it's not even a conscious thing. They start to suppress their abilities in order to fit in, because number one thing is they want to belong to the people who are basically in charge of their survival.
Right.
So, I believe all of us push parts down. Like if you were a flamboyant child and you were born into a quiet family, you might be shamed for that flamboyance and you push that down inside. So a lot of my work is shadow work, helping people to access the parts of themselves they were taught to suppress and support them to come to consciousness and integrate. So there's more energy, they're more aware, they're more present, they make better decisions because
Mhm.
there's more pieces of them sitting around the table participating. And I
Mhm.
actually think that's part of feeling and looking youthful. It takes a lot of energy to hold parts down. So
Mhm.
when you start to bring them up, there's just more of you present and operating in the world. So I actually train people to develop their psychic abilities. In fact, I say to people, the more you see me, the less you'll need me because I'll teach you how to be your own psychic. My job is to help you learn to hear and trust your own inner wisdom. It's just a
So
muscle that needs to be exercised.
it's funny that that last statement that you just made, because in everything that you're describing, I'm very passionate about people accessing their intuition. It's something that I had to come back to. I lost for a long time in my life. And like you said, it's a muscle, and I had to like bring more parts of me to the table, and I had to practice it in small ways and then bigger and bigger ways. And until I finally, what I say, found it again. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but I heard it again. I'm sure it was always there. It was just blocked by a lot of other stuff. But is your intuition kind of like a psychic ability, or are those things different, separate? Because I can't predict the future. I can't look at anybody and
Right.
predict anything about their lives. It's really only about my own internal experience.
Hmm.
and making good decisions and making decisions that to me feel like this is the right decision. Like I have this intuitive sense
Yeah.
that it's the right decision, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I see intuition as emotional intelligence. And it's not just the emotions, it's physical as well. So we will feel in our bodies, in fact, our enteric nervous system, the gut reaction, whether we're heading in the right direction or not. In fact, our enteric nervous system has 100 million neurons. Scientists call it our second brain. So
Mhm.
if your gut tightens against something you're looking at doing, you need to question whether you should be doing it or whether it's the right time. Does something else need to fall into place? Um, so in terms of predicting the future, I believe we live in a quantum universe that's a manifestation of our consciousness. So if somebody says, this is what's going to happen, they are looking at a probability string, if you look at string theory, that if you invest that psychic with enough authority, that's the probability you'll create. So I tend not to say this is what will happen to you because it puts you in a box. Instead, I'll say this is the direction you're heading based on what's happening with your patterns. If that's not a good direction for you, let's look at how you can shift your patterns, which then shifts the external reality, which shifts to reflect the internal. Everything around us is just a manifestation of consciousness.
Mhm.
So when you're making a decision that feels right, you're sensing the alignment with the path I believe our souls choose entering this life. And a lot of my work is to help people get back into that alignment. For example, you might be born to a family that plants the seeds for the patterns you came to work on in this lifetime. So if, for example, you need to learn how to work with power, you might be born to a family that takes your power away so that you know what it is to not have choices. And you have to learn those parts of you have to learn as they grow that now they do have choice. They're in an adult body, they have autonomy, they have choices, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And then you might, as you and I are doing, use that power to empower others.
Mhm. Right, right. Yes. Okay. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful answer. And I believe in all of what you said, like really rings true to me. So that makes sense. So if someone is, well, okay, I'll come back a little bit where you said about, kids being born with these abilities, but then maybe they're saying things or doing things that are not being supported by their family of origin. And so they suppress it. And I do remember as a very young child having a very I don't know how to really explain it. I didn't see things, but a very strong felt sense of presence around me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even remember ever telling anybody about it, to be honest, but it was so palpable. But then losing that throughout time, and trying to work my way back to it. And I think I mean, we see this in a lot of little kids. I remember my children when they were very young, they would say, "Oh, there's grandpop," and grandpop was deceased, and they would point in a
Yes.
direction and say, "There's
Yeah.
grandpop." Or I remember one time my son was very young, like in a crib still, nonverbal, and I heard him, and I got up in the middle of the night to see what was going on, and I opened the door, and there was like this whitish haze that was like all
Yes.
around him in the crib, and I kept blinking my eyes really hard because I kept thinking like there's something in my eyes and that's what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
But also feeling my grandfather's presence really strongly at the same
Yeah.
time. So, it was like 3 a.m. I'm all confused. And then later having a psychic reading, and that psychic knew nothing about me or my family or this experience that I had that I told no one about, and saying, "Oh, your grandfather comes and plays with your son in his crib at night so you can get some sleep." And I was like, "Oh." Holy cow. So I've had these different experiences through myself, my children, and I've talked to a lot of other moms who will say, my child said this or did this. Um, and they do feel a little bit like, ooh, like a little bit creeped out by it. So I do
Mhm.
think we come in with these abilities, but then we lose them. So how do we find our way back to them?
Well, I think a lot of it is um, coming at it with a sense of play.
Mm,
Because when you take it seriously, you tighten up. And this is about being open and flowing. So, for example, you might put a question out to the universe and ask to be shown something. Something really fun you can do, and I got this from reading one of Sonia Choquette's books. I saw her at a Hay House event one time and just loved her approach to things. So when she was a little girl, her mother would sit down at breakfast with her and her sister and say, there are joy guides in the world that will give you presents. So ask for a present today from your joy guide. Don't forget to thank them. And when you come home at the end of the day, tell me what you got. What a neat way of setting your kids up for a positive experience.
Yes.
So I thought, I want to try that. So I
Yes.
said to my joy guides, I would like a present today. And my 5-year-old internally is like, let's do
Yes,
this, right?
so exciting. Yes.
Right. So right after I said it, I drove downtown. I had to go to the post office, and I'm in the post office about to get a stamp for a letter when a gentleman next to me who just bought a whole roll said, would you like a stamp? Thank you. Yes, put it on my envelope, and out it goes. I drive to another part of town. I just pull into a parking spot, and this woman comes running up to me. She says, how long are you here for? I said, 90 minutes. Here, she gives me her slip, which has 90 minutes left. Like, the universe is always trying to reach us and let us know we're never alone. We're always connected to everything. But sometimes we have to set ourselves up for wonder,
Yeah.
set
Yeah.
ourselves up for possibility, and look for the signs. I remember at a very difficult time in my life, I started finding white feathers everywhere, even in my fridge. This woman I barely knew comes knocking at my door and says, I'm supposed to give you this. And it was an entire seagull's wing. She had dressed the end in leather and like done sage over it. She handed me this wing. So talk about being knocked over with a feather by the
Wow.
universe.
Right. Yes. Oh my gosh. That's
Right?
insane. So is our ability to have these experiences directly related to our willingness to be open to them?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. Because it's like if you go to a psychic and you're like, all right, I'm testing you, I'm giving you nothing. Well, if you're closed off, a good psychic isn't going to try and pry away that wall. In fact, I've had times in my life where I've had skeptics, and some family member has pushed them to see me, and their reaction to me is so strong in the negative that I just say, here's your money back. I'm not working with you. You're not ready for anything I would tell you.
yeah.
um, they're protecting themselves. They're not ready for that awareness. What I would also say is, you mentioned going back to your abilities. I would caution against that, because your mind is saying, this is what used to happen, so that's what should happen now. But you're a growing, evolving human being.
Mhm.
The experiences you have now and the way the universe expresses itself to you might be different. So
Mhm.
I think it's better just to be open and say, I need guidance in this area. Please show me what I need to be aware of. For example, it's kind of funny, say, once you place intent, right, it acts like a magnet to pull people, opportunities, and situations to that intent. It doesn't always go the way we think it will. So
Mhm.
there was a point in my life where I struggled financially, and I said to the universe, um, I placed the intent to have a comfortable, affluent life doing the work I love. Now, you notice there's nothing specific there about what comfort,
Mhm.
affluence, or even the work looks like.
Yeah.
And then the next thing, and the number one word I use for any spiritual work, surrender. Because our
Mhm.
limited ego consciousness has no idea what we should have.
Yeah.
And our patterns will always tend to think we deserve less than we can have, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I placed that intent and I let go. And the very next day, the universe launched into action. And I was let go from a yoga studio I was teaching at. And my students were happy with me. So,
Yeah.
but it was the universe's way of going, well, you're spending a lot of time there. And yes, you're enjoying it, but it's not lucrative for you. So it's gone. It also pushed me up against patterns around self doubt and fear of lack that had to be
Mm.
worked through to have
Mhm.
this comfortable, affluent life doing the work I love.
Yeah.
So when you ask to be shown, sometimes you will be pushed up against your stuff,
Yeah. That's
right?
that example is for me personally a really poignant example because we mentioned before I got on the call that I'm a nurse. And I've been a nurse for almost 20 years now. And it's time. I know that it's time for a change for me. And that is why I started this podcast. And I kind of started on this whole journey. And I can feel there's a stickiness around it that I am trying to release because I don't know what the universe has in store for me. I have a vision of what I think I would like, what I think I would like to call in. But I feel like I'm holding it too tightly and I need to open my palm and release it. But it's really hard. It's really hard to do that when you are actively working on something too, right? So you're actively putting your energy and time
Yes.
and commitment into something and then saying like, well, I don't really care about the outcome, which I know that's not really what you're saying, but it's hard. It's a
But
hard
let's
place.
address the stickiness though. Let's address the stickiness. When there is resistance, I find a lot of people who are trying to do the spiritual work think, oh, I need to release that. Nah, it's never going to work for you. Um, you want to dive into it. So what I would suggest is feel into your body. Where do I feel that resistance as a physical sensation?
Right.
In other words, it's about paying attention to it. Every one of our subconscious patterns is trying to protect us based on what was going on in our life at the time the pattern was created. So if your parents were very cautionary, you need a practical job, you gotta, you gotta make a lot of money because life's not going to hand you anything. Right?
All the above. Yeah.
I know. I'm mirroring your subconscious right now. I didn't ask permission, but I figured you'd be okay with
I'm
this.
100% open. Yeah, read me.
Okay. Okay. Um, and so your resistance is the cautionary tale of, well, don't go and do anything new because what if it doesn't work out and everything goes wrong. So you want to first of all thank the pattern. It's trying to help you based on what it knows. And remember, it's not conscious. It doesn't know it's in an adult body. It doesn't know that you've created a reality around you that works for you. It has no idea. So if we tune into those parts of ourselves, it's like we're parenting them. So you tune into the resistance. Where do I feel it physically? I'm going to breathe into that. And I'm going to tune into the emotion. And then I'm going to ask my psyche for an image of myself at the age the pattern started. And whatever image comes up, trust it. It might be a teenager, it might be a 2-year-old, anything in between. Each time you do the exercise, it might be different parts. We exist in layers. And then you can tune into that part and say, thank you for everything you've done to try to keep me safe all these years. What do you need me to know? Or what do you need from me for you to be okay with me moving forward in a different direction? And have an internal conversation. You might have many internal conversations, but the idea is to work with the part, not suppress it and, not try to release it, which is just another form of suppression.
Okay.
Right? All of you deserves to come along for the journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
very helpful because I already knew that, like I knew that existed, that pattern, that ways of thinking. But I was trying to just let it go versus trying to work with it. So that's it's a very different way of coming at it. So that is super helpful.
And
Thank you.
well, good. I'm glad. And a lot of people, this is the challenge, is to do the deep spiritual work. It's not about blissing out. It's about diving into the gritty, hard stuff. And our society is very pleasure driven. Oh, you're uncomfortable? Take a pill, go to work, call a friend, anything but sit with yourself. So when you can sit with the uncomfortable feelings, they have a chance to come to consciousness. And then there's more of you participating in your decisions because those parts of you that are suppressed also contain some of your wisdom.
Yeah. That's so good. So good. This is why I wanted to talk to you. So let me check the time here. I don't want to hold you past. Okay, we have time. So someone comes to you and says, I'm really struggling with X, Y, and Z. What is your process? Like, how do you walk them through this? And is it do you meet multiple times? It's like a stepwise process?
Yeah, it depends on the person. Occasionally people get what they need in a session and off they go. I'm finding more and more people are getting my packages and working with me on an ongoing basis because they are taking a deep dive. They're making shifts in their lives. They want not only the support of having somebody who really cares about them and their journey, but somebody who can say, here's some strategies for what you're facing right now. I can be very practical in terms of doing this. And I find a lot of times when I ask people, what brought you to my door, they'll say, I'm lost. So in Buddhism, there's the concept of sitting in the void. It's a very necessary place for all of us to go because our ego always wants to go from a known to unknown. It doesn't like the gray areas.
Mhm.
So it'll only take you to where you've already been,
Mhm.
right? So when you drop into the void, you get to that point of going, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. Terrifying for the ego, but so helpful on our journey because if you can surrender to that, something new can arise out of the void because the void isn't really emptiness. It's the fullness of potential.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
So my process is, and it's very organic. It depends on the person I'm working with. Some people come in and as they start to talk about what's going on, I'm tuning in, I'm picking up on things and I'm mirroring back, well, this is what I'm seeing and here's how we can work with that. Some people tell me nothing. I just tune in and say, this is what your subconscious is telling me you most need to know right now. And I'm not in this to polish my ego. I say to people, I might not give you the name of your neighbor's pet cat, but I will give you information that will help you on your path. Every psychic works differently. So I
Yes.
don't get everything about you. I just get what your subconscious needs you to know to move you forward.
Mhm.
And as a coach, I then give you, tools I've developed for over 40 years to help you do that work. So people tend to come out of it with more clarity about themselves, their patterns, the reality they're creating, the reality they want to create, and how to go about doing that by really aligning with the path your soul chose from the get-go. It's really about bringing you back to your original self and uncovering all the parts of you that you suppressed along the way. So I have some people who've worked with me for years. I've had some people that, I hear from just every now and then. It really varies and it
Okay.
just depends on how people need to work.
And do
So
you find that people, when you tell people things that they kind of already knew it, but you are almost like a permission giver, like you're like,
yeah,
you
that's
know
a good way of
this,
putting it.
yeah, but I'm now going to tell it to you so that you feel like somebody else sees it and we are together in this.
Yeah, sometimes people need to validate. It's like my job is to help you to listen to and trust your intuition. So you might get an inkling, and then when you have somebody say, "Yeah, bang on, now let's run with that." Now it's like, yeah, you got that permission to go deeper. And I do work with the tarot, not predictively so much as to map the subconscious and say, "This is what's going on. This is the reality you're creating. Let's look at how you can shift it." And I do a number of different spreads for different things. I also can see the chakras. So I can look at each chakra and tell the person what I'm getting. And that's not a static thing, it's changing. So it'll be like whatever's coming up now. And as you shift, that's going to shift too. So
Mhm.
I've got a number of different ways, as well as just tuning in. I get visions, I get auditory messages. Sometimes I will feel what's happening in the body. I'm kind of your one stop psychic shop. I pick up
Yeah.
a lot of different things, right? But it's
Mm.
all geared toward giving you clarity about what's operating inside that's moving you forward, what's holding you back, how do we help that to come forward too, so you get not only the clarity of the direction you need to take in life, but the energy, the motivation to go there. A lot of times people are giving their energy away to dysfunctional relationships. They need to learn about boundaries. They need to learn how to gather their energy back into their being instead of it being spread in a million different directions. They need to know about their self-sabotage patterns.
Yeah, yeah. So I have so many questions based on what you just said. So one is, and I will say, I mentioned my daughter earlier and how she definitely has psychic abilities, and it's hysterical. We laugh all the time because she'll say, like, I have all these psychic abilities, but they're totally useless. Like all the information I receive is like dumb and like not helpful at all. Like the other day, she was like, I knew so and so got a haircut. And then he walked into class and he'd gotten a different haircut. And she's like, what is this? This is so stupid. Like, I can't use this for anything. I want psychic abilities I can use. But she's also very empathic. And I feel like those two kind of go hand in hand. And
Yeah.
she can really sense people's energies, which I am also empathic and I really can sense people's energies as well. And so for both of us, that can be very exhausting. So when you're
Yep.
describing what you do, all I'm thinking is like energy drain. Like I am like tired listening to you.
Well,
so how do you manage your energy when you are really feeling so much of other people's stuff?
I just love that you brought this question up, Katie, because I actually, as an empath, work with other empaths to help them to manage their abilities. You don't have to be on all the time. And I don't
Okay.
use my own energy when I'm doing this work. I channel universal energy. So I can go and do a show and do back-to-back readings all day. And I come out on a high because of it,
Okay.
because I'm channeling the energy of the universe, right?
Okay.
The thing is, people can be crippled by their empathy. I've seen people, they get up in the morning, they're great, they go to work, they absorb everybody else's stuff. And now why am I miserable? Because they don't know where they end and somebody else begins. I think it's so funny though, when you mention about her picking up on a haircut, um, deja vu, right? Which is French for already seen. So I would, in my twilight sleep, have a scenario go through my mind where I look over and I see this object and then I see that, and then somebody comes in the room and then it'll actually happen. And I'm able to go, oh yeah, 2 weeks ago in my twilight sleep, I had this experience.
Oh
Time
my
isn't
gosh.
linear. Time
Yeah.
loops on itself.
Yeah.
Everything is happening all at once in the eternal now. So your daughter's picking up on the fluidity of time, which right now might be like, well, this is dumb. But we watch those TV shows where, oh, I saw a dead person and then I rescued their family member. And I
Right.
think it's kind of given us this idea that if we have abilities, we're supposed to be out saving the world. No, it's just like any other ability. You might be good at
Yeah.
riding a bike, but you don't do that all the time either.
Right.
Right?
Right. Right. She wants it to be useful. I mean, she's had some really challenging health stuff in her life. And she's always like, why can't I use this to figure out what's wrong with me? Like what's going on? Like I know that so-and-so got a haircut and I know that so-and-so broke up before,
Yeah.
anybody else gone down. And I know all this useless information. I want to be able to channel it and use it for something that helps even myself. But I feel like I'm sure there's a learning of how to use this, I would
Yes.
assume. Yeah.
Yes, and that's a laudable thing. And actually, I have on my podcast, if you go to my YouTube, Bonita K. Hodgson, um, you'll see that I have a whole section on health because I have sarcoidosis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I did everything the doctors told me to do, but I also worked on what is the pattern showing up as this disease. I had granulomas growing in the lymph nodes around my heart. It's like, oh, I've got a wall around my heart. How interestingly symbolic
Wow.
that is, right?
Yes.
And so, I might be in a flare up, I might not. There's times that it doesn't affect me at all. But I look on it as it's the most amazing teacher because not everything, no matter how deep we go into spiritual work, sometimes we just can't get to what is this. And so our bodies will cooperate with us and expose that in a really symbolic way.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can absolutely work with your health.
Yeah.
It's tuning in as well, just like you do with emotions. If there's physical discomfort, tuning in on that area and asking, what is this trying to tell me? You might not get answers right away, but if you keep asking the right questions, eventually some gestalt will come. And you never know how it might help her later. Right now, she's like a horse going out of the gate. She's charging ahead and she's impatient.
Yeah.
But if she's got these abilities and the desire to help herself and others, I believe it'll come. And if
Yeah.
she, I do work with young people, I work with everybody who wants to develop their abilities. And I don't just teach them how to develop, I teach them how to manage it and how to
Mhm.
do it ethically. I don't walk around switched on. I'll go
Right.
to a party and somebody go, oh, you're psychic. What are you getting on me? Nothing. You didn't
Right.
give me permission,
Right.
you know?
Which is also, I assume, how you protect your own energy as well, if you're not switched on all the time.
I actually don't believe in protecting energy. Let's think about
Yeah.
this for a moment.
Okay. Because I
Okay.
feel like energy can be sucked right out of me.
Only with your permission. But if you have a core pattern that's a people pleaser pattern that says, I have to give people energy, whether I like it or not, people
Mm.
can pull on your energy.
Okay.
And that's really
Okay.
common in your profession,
Yeah, I could see
right?
that. Right, right.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you think of the universe as one consciousness expressing itself in myriad forms, we're only ever meeting an aspect of ourselves.
Mhm.
Okay. So we are this energy field with all these chakras that allows for flow of energy in and out. So if we're losing energy, on some level we've agreed to let people take that energy, and the flip side of the pattern is we feel bad for wanting energy back. So for example, I sat with a group of psychics and one of them said, well, as you know, none of us can make a living at this. I said, I do. But a lot of people in spiritual work think that there's something wrong with making a good living at doing this.
Mhm.
But I look at it this way: if you're affluent, you can make a bigger difference in your community. I can pay,
Mhm.
my accountant, I can buy clothes from my friend's store. There's a trickle down
Mhm.
effect to my doing well. I have
Right.
time to volunteer every week at the SPCA.
Mhm.
I have a sustainable business. So if years from now you need me, I'm still available. I'm still doing what I do.
Right.
Right. So I actually
Mhm.
coach people on thinking differently about affluence. So if you're losing energy, first of all, if you say, I have to protect myself, guess what? You had to create something to protect yourself from.
Mhm.
That's the reality you created. It's energy, then I ask myself, in what way am I not centered? What pattern is running that I gave that energy away? What
Mm.
pattern is running that is not allowing energy to flow back into me?
Okay.
Right?
That's definitely a different way of thinking about it. Because I feel like if people who are empathic generally can very much, energy is palpable. Like it's like I walk into a room
Yes.
and I actually can feel a physical sensation
Yes.
with the energy in the room. And sometimes that energy is wonderful and warm and loving and compassionate and fantastic. And sometimes it's not. And so the idea of allowing that to just flow in and flow out, that energy that is not warm, loving, open, compassionate, all that, more negative energy is something, again, I'd never thought about it that way. I
Well,
immediately almost feel like an actual physical bracing when I walk into an
yeah,
environment like
and I
that.
should clarify, I'm not talking about letting that energy flow in. I'm also not talking about blocking it. So we're going to get back to a Buddhist principle here: attachment. Say you walk into a room and you're dealing with a patient they're suffering, they're in pain, and they're angry, right? If you can observe that with compassion, you're not going to feel like, oh, they got angry at me. It'll be like, oh, they're suffering, and I can have
Mhm.
compassion for that. If it makes you either anxious, I need to stop that behavior, or angry, I don't deserve that behavior, that's attachment. And
Mhm.
that's actually what's causing the suffering, not
Mhm.
what's happening around you, but how you're responding to it. So when we're centered, energy can just flow through us and it doesn't really affect us in a negative way because we're not giving it a story. We're not
Mhm.
attached to it. It's like, for example, if you walk down the street and some stranger goes, you're ugly, you might go, well, that's weird. But if a family member says it, you're going to have a different reaction because there's attachment there. There's a pattern that gets
Mhm.
triggered.
Mhm.
So if you think about it, if you look at everybody that we meet as a reflection of some part of us, the universe is giving us an opportunity to work on ourselves by holding up a mirror to whatever aspects we have not learned about yet.
Mhm.
Then when we see that, we're going to have a different reaction. I can give you a really concrete example. My car was in getting the winter tires put on one year. So I go to the bus stop and this man approaches me at the bus stop And he starts to tell me with lots of invective about how angry he is because the last driver took him to the wrong stop and he missed his appointment with his parole officer. And he's going on and on about this. And I'm looking at him thinking, and he's like, he's swearing up a storm, right? And I'm looking at him thinking, what an interesting reflection of my inner masculine this is. That part of me that thinks the world is against it. So I just stayed open and present and listened. And I made one comment. He talked about if the next driver is a problem, he's going to break a window on the bus. I said, that might not yield the results you're looking for.
Yeah.
But what was fascinating was all this invective would come out of him, and then he'd stop and he'd look at me and go, I'm sorry, I'm swearing. And then the pattern would run again. He'd swear and he'd stop and go, I'm sorry, I'm swearing. Because his pattern is probably used to either getting a wall, people ignore him, or a pushback, don't talk to me. Instead, here's this feminine reflection, just open, soft, listening. And so for moments at a time, he could see his own pattern and apologize for it. It was too strong for him to stop it entirely, but he had moments of awareness. So it's not about going out there and manipulating and controlling what's going on around us. It's more the one thing we have a say over is how we respond. I've had clients come to my office who have a lot of rage, and I will encourage them to bring that rage up and project it on me. And they'll be like, well, I don't want to do that. Some part of you does. And they'll swear, or some way they'll project that anger. And then the most interesting thing happens. They start to glow. It's like that part of them that wanted to be heard and respected, their inner warrior, finally got its say, because I wasn't attached to how it came up. And often after a while, that warrior would step aside and show me the frightened 4-year-old that's been protecting for 60 years. Right?
Yeah.
I know I just threw a lot of stuff at you, but it's a very different way of looking at things.
It
right?
is a very different way. It really, really is, because I, just from my own personal experience, don't feel an attachment. Like if I encounter someone and they're very aggressive or angry or whatever the case may be, I don't have a lot of attachment to that, but yet the energetic doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good in my body, even though I can have compassion for the person. I can see that they're running a program. I can see that, they're suffering as well, even if they're trying to inflict suffering on me. But there's still something about the energetic that just doesn't feel good. That's all. It doesn't feel neutral. I guess I should allow it to feel neutral. But it does not feel neutral. It still feels negative.
I wouldn't say it's about allowing it to feel neutral, because that could be suppressing the part that's having a negative reaction to it. Instead, you can go, and this is just a suggestion, what part of me is having this reaction? And, again, tuning in and checking in with that part and asking it what it needs. So, for example, women are often taught that anger is a negative. Anger is the energy of action. That part of you might come up and say, hey, you need to put that person in their place, or you need to step out of the room, but you need to do something about this. And that feeling you're getting, whether it's irritation or fear or what have you, deserves your attention, deserves a response from you to support it to come to consciousness. It might be working with it and having it come all the way up and observe that person and see that they actually mean no harm to you. But just trying not to have the feeling doesn't help it become conscious.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very complicated because, again, as a nurse, you encounter a lot of people, they're in a situation in their lives often where they are suffering, they are scared, there's a loss of control. So, I have so much compassion for all of that. And they will take it out on the nurse a lot because we're the one in the room the most and they see us the most. It's like being the mom, like the kid's always like the worst for you. And so it's just exhausting. Like you're like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. Like I am tired of dealing with this. So I will have to try to take some of these tips and incorporate them into my life. I don't know that I feel anything that you're describing, like that I am angry at the person, or I shouldn't be treated like this, or maybe I'm internalizing this is my fault or anything. It's not a peaceful space. And I would prefer I would prefer to be in a peaceful space. So maybe that's it, some resistance to being in a space that is not peaceful, that is a little
Yeah.
more, yeah, challenging.
And and that might be the thing. You're talking about moving out of that kind of environment. When you're an empath, you're extra sensitive to what's going on. And I get it. I've worked in dysfunctional environments myself and finally came to the conclusion that if I was going to have a jerk for a boss, it might as well be me. And
That's fantastic.
so yeah, you might just be getting the signal. This environment is no longer reflective of what is healing, nurturing, and empowering for me. And but still pay attention to the feeling. I remember I was working for a software company, and it turned out to be a pretty dysfunctional environment. And I started noticing I was getting stomach aches and headaches. And then I went home for lunch one day, and the stomach ache and headache went away. And when I went back to work, it was back. And I was like, got it. My body's saying I don't belong here anymore. And I very
Yeah,
quickly left that environment. And
yeah,
sometimes it's as simple as that. Your body's saying this is not your path. You don't belong here.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Amazing the amount of intuition we get through the body. And I have such empathy for you. Like I last month I passed a gallstone and I was in the hospital screaming in pain for 2 hours and hoping I would just pass out before I was finally given medication. And I was very gracious with the nurses because I thought, oh my God, you have to listen to this all the time.
Yeah.
How? You know?
Yes. I say all the time that I come home from work and I'm just, they're 12-hour shifts, so they're long shifts and you're on your feet and all the things. But the level of exhaustion that I come home with seems disproportionate to what happened in my day. And I can
Yeah.
only assume that that is some sort of energetic drain that is happening, that is making me feel that level of exhaustion. So, and I think, this
Well,
happens in parenthood. This happens in many areas of life where
yeah.
they just feel drained of their energy.
But
So
if
yeah, no, go
sorry,
ahead.
but if you are applying energy to be somewhere you don't want to be, it's like people say, but I make so much money at this job. Money is concentrated personal energy. If you're using energy to force yourself to be there, you're not making money, you're losing energy.
Yeah.
When I worked at the university, I remember, back in Ontario, I remember coming home one day and I'm sitting in front of the computer, just doing my personal emails, and I got a bag of President's Choice chocolate chunk cookies in my lap. 15 minutes later, that bag was empty. And I had no memory of having eaten the cookies. And it was an epiphany for me. It's like, what part of me is losing so much energy to this situation that it's desperately trying to get it back in the quickest way it can? And it
Yeah.
wasn't long after that I left.
Yeah. I'm sure people can, an example like that, or what I talked about, it shows up in many different areas of our lives, not just in our
Mm-hmm.
work lives. So that's just having the awareness is huge that maybe this is happening in your life and that you need to somehow make a change. Because sometimes we don't even, like you said, all these ingrained patterns, maybe we don't even recognize that we need a change or that something is draining our energy. We just think it's the way it is. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's a great concrete example that people can use as a little guidepost for themselves in their lives.
And sometimes you'll see in those environments, everybody's got some kind of immune issue or illness because their body is trying to tell them, get out. And they're
Yeah,
not listening because their patterns won't let them,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. And the practicalities of life, which is also something that, you can be in an environment maybe that you feel you need to not be in anymore, but then how do you make the changes that you need to make?
Mm-hmm.
So do you work with people on that too, like guiding them
Yes,
through? You do. Okay. Yeah. Because there's a
I
lot of
do a
like
lot of
practical
help with that.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
That needs to
And
happen.
and I'll often say, it's not about just quit and now you're in a panic state because you have no money coming in. But if every day or every week you're setting aside time to work toward what does make your soul sing,
Yeah.
what does make you feel on purpose, aligned with your soul's purpose, your mind will start to go, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I am moving toward that. And when that becomes viable, you can let the other go. Or you might get
Mhm.
to a point of going, I can see the possibilities enough here and see that things are starting to come together. I can let that go now.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of work with helping people to really check in with what are you really here to do? And now let's help you get doing it. But
Yeah.
it's so important to work on the core patterns, because if you're just going, I need to get away from that, and you don't make the internal shift, then say you had a difficult boss, you'll have difficult clients, right?
Yeah.
It's got to do the internal shift.
That's so true. Oh my gosh. Yes, that stuff that just keeps showing up in your life over and over and over. You're like, why
Yeah.
am I always the person that X? Well, because you haven't learned your lesson yet. So
Oh,
life,
many times I would look up and go, really? Am I really having to deal with this again?
yes. Oh, that's so funny. Do you ever have people who come to you and say, I don't know what's wrong. Like, I feel like there's something really off, but I can't
Yeah.
even begin to tell you what it is. You
Yeah.
do. Okay. Okay. That's
Yeah. And
interesting.
that's my forte as a psychic coach, right? Is that I can get information directly from the subconscious that the conscious mind is blocking. And it can be really funny. I did an event many years ago in Ontario, and there's a lady sitting in front of me and her husband standing behind her. And I always let people have people with them if they want them there.
Mhm.
I had an hour with her. Everything I said to her, she said, nope, you're wrong. You're wrong. Meanwhile, hubby's standing behind her, nodding vigorously and rolling his eyes.
Yes.
And it wasn't my place to tell her, well, your husband agrees with me, because
Right.
that would be ego. All I
Yeah.
could say to her is, well, all I can tell you is that's what I'm getting, and maybe it'll make more sense later on. And there was probably
Yeah.
an interesting discussion on the drive home.
Right.
So I looked at it this way: her conscious mind was in total resistance to everything I said.
Yeah.
She didn't get out of the chair. She didn't walk away. There was a part of her ready to hear that.
Yeah.
And I'm here to plant seeds. It's none of my business whether they grow or not if a person doesn't continue to work with me.
Yeah.
Right? All I can do is say, this is what I'm getting. So a lot of times the conscious mind might have no idea what the issue is. The subconscious is pretty clear.
Okay.
And so if somebody's at least open to finding out if there's something that they don't see, in which case they come to me because they're open for that, or they wouldn't come to me,
Mhm.
we can get to what it is, and we can
Yeah.
get them moving on that. So I've had people who've been really stuck in certain situations in their life that go through monumental shifts and make major changes in their life. But I don't take credit for that. They came to me, they did the work, they did the
Mhm.
hard, gritty work of looking at themselves. And I
Yeah.
have a lot of respect for the courage it takes to do that work.
Yeah.
You
Because it
know,
can be scary. It can be scary to
sure.
uncover what clearly, for whatever reason, your mind decided to push down. And is it, so describe the subconscious for our listeners. Like, if someone hasn't really learned a lot about the subconscious, how would you explain it to them?
I think it's awareness with the blinders off. So, for example, if your intuition tells you you need to change your job, you need to end that friendship because it's not working for you. It's toxic, or I hate the term toxic. It's bandied about so much, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You need to change something about your life that takes you out of your comfort zone, because the ego goes, this is prison, but at least I know this prison.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that people aren't psychic. They don't want the follow through because they're going to have to make a change that's going to take them out of their comfort zone. So the subconscious doesn't have a sense of comfort zone. It doesn't apply our social mores to things. So for example, somebody might have a close friendship with somebody and be close to their child, and if the friendship ends, that connection with the child ends, and their subconscious says they're grieving the loss of a child even though they didn't have that child. Subconscious doesn't care about social mores, right? So the judgments, the compartmentalization of things so we don't have to look at other things, that's all the job of the conscious mind, and it serves a purpose. If you were attuned to everything all the time, most of us probably wouldn't function very well. When you're in your car, you got to focus on what you're doing. When you're at your job, you got to focus on what you're doing. You've got to push other things out of the way.
Yeah.
But we push down so much, it comes through in our dreams and in physical experiences. And so the main thing with the subconscious is it's just this expanded awareness. It's attached to the entire universe. It can give us everything we need, but we have to be open to hearing things we might not want to hear.
Yeah.
We have to be open as well to following through, because here's how the subconscious works. If your intuition gives you information and you don't work with it, after a while, it's going to go, why should I tell you anything? You don't do anything with it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're exercising your intuition and every time it tells you to do something, you follow through, after a while, it's going, well, here's some more information.
Mm-hmm.
And it can get super, super specific. Like,
Yeah.
I can give you an example. A number of years ago, I had plans to go to a New Year's dance with some girlfriends. And that morning, New Year's Eve, I get a text from one of them, 10 o'clock in the morning. A bunch of us are getting together for dinner at 6. Do you want to join us? And I felt my gut clench. And I did something we almost never do. I bought myself time to figure out what that was. I texted back, I'm waiting to hear back from someone. I'll let you know. I was waiting to hear back from me. So, I had things to do. About 2 o'clock in the about 2 o'clock. Well, we women are conditioned to go, you want me, I'm there. And we don't check in. Am I supposed to be there? Is that my path? So about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I go to check in again. My pattern right now is super loud. I really like people. I really like food. If I'm a good friend, I'll be there. But my gut is still clenching. So I asked internally, why can't I go? And I'm told, you're going to have a client at that time. It's 2 o'clock on New Year's Eve. My phone has not rung. What do I do with that information? I text my friend back. Sorry, I have an overlap. I can't make it. I'll see you at the dance at 8 o'clock. That's how much I trust my intuition. At 4:30, the call comes. She says, I've been in town all week. I really wanted to see you. I haven't been able to. Can I see you today at 6 o'clock? I spent 90 minutes with my client. I had 30 minutes to get to the dance. And she said to me, she said, I got up this morning determined somehow I would see you today. And that intention, just like an email in my inbox, right? I got the message super clear. I was to hold that time for her. We're all connected, right? It's called entanglement. That's the quantum physical term. That's the real internet. Everything and everybody's hooked up to everything. And that information is there if we're willing to experience it. But our patterns are much louder than our intuition.
Yeah. Oh my
You
God,
have
that's
to learn
so full body chills, full body chills. So good. That's amazing. That is amazing. And such, again, permission giving, like that people can, like just having that knowledge, having that awareness that that's how it works, that's how life really works. And that we can wait back to hear from someone ourselves. Love that. Definitely using that.
Well, and if a friend pressures you, if you say, I need to check my schedule or I need to get back to you, and they pressure you, that's also giving you information about the dynamics of that friendship, that one's not predicated on a person allowing you to listen to yourself and make the decision that's best for you. A lot of times we give our energy away to friendships that are difficult, ones that are not really good for us. We satisfy the other person's agenda and we ignore ourselves. So as soon as you start really listening to yourself and speaking up, I call it cultivating your inner leader. It's going to shake up people around you who aren't used to you not accommodating their pattern. And we can either go, oops, my bad, I'll climb back in that little box we had me in so you're not uncomfortable.
Right.
Or we can go, I'm clear, this is what I need to do. I see you struggling with my choice. Maybe you'll feel it's appropriate to say, is there some way I can support you working through your struggle? Or you might just say, I'm clear, this is what I need to do. Sorry that it's upsetting you.
Yeah.
And leave it at that. We don't have to walk other people's paths for them. We can't.
Yeah.
But what we can do by activating our inner leader, it's going to shake some people up. At that moment, they have an opportunity to look at their own stuff and become conscious. They may not take it. They may not thank you for it, but at least you didn't help them stay asleep.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Right?
so good. So good. So good. All right. I want to be mindful of your time. Do you have a few more minutes?
Sure, I do. Yep.
Okay. So I have another big question, which is, if you're really trying on this path, you're really trying to follow your intuition, you're really trying to go into your body and feel, your emotions and feel, the decisions you should be making. but sometimes you are just coming up blank. Like there is nothing. Like you
Yep.
don't feel
Yep.
anything in your body, you don't
Been
hear
there,
anything, you
done
don't
that.
see. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
So what is that all about? Is it maybe it's not time for you to know that information? Are you not open enough to know that information? Like what, like, because I'm telling you, I'm on this journey and I'm trying, and there are some times that it's like a download, like boom, I just know it. And then
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, I got nothing, like absolutely nothing.
And it's like the story of the young monk who goes to the head monk and says, "How long before I become enlightened?" And he says, 10 years. What if I try harder? 20 years. What if I try even harder? 30 years.
I just heard this on another podcast, this story. That's so funny. I've never heard that before. Now twice in a week. Yeah.
If you're hearing it more than once, that's the universe giving you a message, right?
Yes.
Sometimes what it is that we're impatient as hell, for one thing. We want to make vision, right? And we also have expectations that we should experience our intuition a certain way. So for example, if you're used to being clairaudient, you get a voice in your head. Well, what if it comes some other way? Like one of the things I do when I'm training people and using their psychic ability is I say, we're going to work first with the way your intuition already works that you trust and know. And then we're going to start adding other types of vocabulary, right? So for example, last fall, I hadn't been dating much during COVID. I went out with a couple of people. Both times went, they're going to get COVID. I have to stop dating them. They got COVID. So
Same.
It's intuition can be a helpful thing. And so I wasn't dating for a while, and my mentor and his partner came to visit, and he said, "It's time you got back out there." But he said, what you need to do is you need to sit and ask yourself, what do I need to know to walk my path? What do I need to do? So I did that. I did that for 2 weeks. And all I got was this inner churning. I didn't get any gestalts, no realizations, just this churning. But I kept gentle pressure on the pattern. I kept asking those questions. Every time I had time to sit down and ask, I asked. And after 2 weeks, it's like I woke up one morning and it was like the sky was brighter. I felt like I'd been shot out of a cannon. I didn't have a conscious realization, but I knew something had shifted. Some of these shifts are so deep, they don't come to consciousness, but you feel the shift.
Yeah.
And within about a week and a half, I met my husband and my life completely changed. So,
oh, wow. Oh, wow. Okay. Actually, that really resonates because, not in, I met my husband 25 years ago, so not in that way, but in the sense that I have had experiences like that. I would never have identified them as intuition, but experiences where there was just some sort of shift that I just felt
yeah.
different in some way that I probably chalked up to, like, I had a really good night's sleep, right? I don't know what I chalked it up to, but something in the very material world that was not actually, because I actually do tend to be a very auditory. I don't know the term you used, but I tend to hear the
clairaudient.
Yeah, clairaudient.
Yeah.
That's how I tend to get things. But sometimes it's a gut feel, like sometimes it's just like an internal feeling or whatever.
Yeah.
But this just kind of overall shift where, like, you're looking at the same thing, but you're seeing it totally different than the day before. Like it's the same thing you just looked at the day before, and now all of a sudden you see it in such a wider, with such a wider lens, or just like this internal, I don't know, shift. And I don't really know how to describe it other than that. So that's fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Because there are and to keep asking is great too, because sometimes we are impatient, and I think we ask once and it doesn't come, and then we think, nah, well, it's not going to come. I don't have any intuition. But to be persistent and to keep asking and keep being
just
open.
gentle pressure on the pattern, right? To say, I'm not just going to let this pattern run the show. I'm going to do what I can to help it become conscious, but I'm going to hold it to, you have to keep growing. You have to keep opening. I'm going to keep asking the questions. And the thing with asking questions, here's where most people struggle, because our society prizes intellect over intuition. So we'll ask a question, and then what's the next thing we do? We try to figure out the answer. Not going to work. Instead, you ask the question, and I know you know this, you have to sit in the limbic space of just awareness and allowing for something to arise without deciding what that should look like. And that's the hard part. If you're used to intuition working a certain way, you might not be allowing for it to work in a different way. So your vocabulary can increase when you're just like, okay, I'm putting this out there, I'm sitting, I'm allowing for things to shift and arise, and I'm just practicing just open awareness. Let's see what comes.
Yeah.
Sometimes something external in the world will show something to you, but it's always an internal shift that then shifts the external world. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes place a lot of attention on trying to control the external
Mm-hmm.
so that we don't have to feel what's coming up for us.
Yeah. And I just want to repeat what you just said there because I think it's so important. It's always an internal shift that creates an external change, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful thing for listeners to really hear. I've seen it over and over and over again, like all change starts inside and moves outward.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it is really hard sometimes to because we want it now. We want it fast. We want it now. We want it the way we want it. We have all these ideas around it. My daughter, I mentioned, she's had a lot of physical challenges, actually both mental health and physical health challenges. And it's been many years we've been on this journey. And I've had to make tons of decisions and figure out what we're doing next and who we're seeing next and what to do. And sometimes I get a instinctual feeling about that. And sometimes I don't. Um, and sometimes I feel really worried about her and what the future looks like. But then really the bigger part of me is always like, I 100% know she's going to be okay. I don't know how we're going to get there. I don't know what it's
Mm-hmm.
going to look like, but I 100% know she's going to be okay. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a very interesting, like it's this huge gap between what I feel so instinctually and deep that she's going to be
Mm-hmm.
okay with this everyday of experience of trying to get her to that place. And
Mm-hmm.
so, it'd be great if I had a little more path, more guidance along the way. So I'm going to try some of these things. But I just think what I'm saying is there can be a big gap between your gritty everyday, like doing and what
Yes.
you kind of like instinctually big picture know.
And we're all human, right? Like we all get angry, we all get scared, we all get sad, we all have our insecurities. And it's realizing you don't have to be some realized being. You came here for the human experience. I
Mm,
think what's helped me is to remember, and I was born with past life recall. I can recall half a dozen past lives where I was working on the pattern I'm working on this time.
yeah.
And so I can see the panoply of events, like having been one end of the spectrum and the other in terms of, in my case, working with power. So if you think of it that you and your daughter have had many lives, many experiences, this is just one. It's just a blip in the whole experience of the universe. And we're eternal beings having a human experience. So um, for whatever reason she chose this form and these experiences right now, you can try to control them because part of you would like her just to not suffer,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or you can say, what's the purpose of this? And
Yeah.
not just what's the purpose for her. She's your reflection on some level. What's the purpose for you? When you're wanting better for her, what is it bringing up for you that you can then turn inward and go, how am I triggered? Because
Yeah.
the one thing you can do, even when you feel like I've no control over her experience, you can look at what it's bringing up for you. You can work on your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're feeling like, she's going to be okay, you can also impart that to her. I
Mm-hmm.
know this is hard, but I have complete confidence in you that you're going to come out the other side. I'm going to
Yeah.
support you to get there, but I believe in you,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
And I do tell her that. I do. It's just,
Yeah.
such a gap between this knowing, what I call a knowing, and then
Yes.
the everyday steps that you need to take and the ups and the downs and all the in between.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wish I could just live in the knowing and be like blissful in the knowing. But it doesn't seem to work like that. Like you said, we are humans, we are having a human
Yeah.
experience, and absolutely her experience has been a huge part of my own awakening, because you can't mother a child who is experiencing so much suffering without that, you know doing something to you as well. So um
I'm
it's
sure it's an incredible teaching for both of you, and teachings are often really hard and gritty. I'm
yeah,
also a big believer that the experiences we go through are providing the gifts that we're meant to offer later on.
yeah, I believe that
you
as
know?
well. I believe
And
that as well.
she wants to use her abilities. So that desire, when she's ready, when,
Mhm.
you know, she's where she needs to be, because it sounds like right now her attention is needing to go to her physical and emotional well-being.
Mhm.
That if she were to start applying it to other people, she might drain herself,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah.
But when the time is right and she's come to that point where she'll know,
Yeah.
she'll be able to apply it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the same thing. I think the same thing. Well, thank you so much for being here, Bonita. I could keep you on this call forever. But I really appreciate you being here, especially you're not feeling so well today. So thank you so much for
uh,
showing up and sharing your wisdom. I will definitely put your website in the show notes so
Thank
anybody
you.
who wants to find you can get to you. And also you have a podcast, right? You have your website,
Yes.
a podcast. Is that
Uh, yeah,
access to
the
the podcast through the
podcast.
website, or should I put that separate?
Well, there's some of the episodes are there so people can find them in the blog and such. But it's Bonita K. Hodgson at like that's my handle on YouTube.
Okay.
So
Okay. I will
yeah,
put that in there as well.
awesome. Thank
Okay.
you. And this has been such a pleasure, Katie. So I've just thoroughly enjoyed. I feel like sitting with an old friend having a cup of coffee,
I
so,
know.
even though
I
it's
know.
water.
Me too. Water here too.
Thank you
But
so
I
much.
totally agree. Thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. And I hope you feel well again soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.